All right, well, let's split them then. First three. What did you think overall, and your thoughts on the first three episodes? That little story on Ventress, and I believe his name's Lycos.
Yeah, of the two, I actually enjoyed this story arc more, and it probably just has more to do with the fact I've just never really been a huge follower or fan of Cad Bane, but that doesn't mean I hated it. I just of the two, I preferred the Ventress story, and she, I know she was introduced in the Clone Wars. I At some point I thought she had been killed, and then the Night Sisters had brought her back, and then as this show opens, though, you see that I guess she was killed yet again, and then
No,
or
no,
maybe
because yes, we knew she died, but she died in a book called Dark Disciple. But then she appeared in the Bad Batch. For the longest time, it was unexplained, and so this explains how she came back to be in the Bad Batch and still alive now. And it's anyway, she's killed in that book, so it kind of like this story picks up right near the end of that.
so. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. Just so we are on the same page, she was killed in the show, in the Clone Wars
No,
show.
no,
No,
I
no,
don't.
she
I don't think she was ever killed in the show. No,
okay, but she was in the book, and this is what we're seeing, which is her rebirth after that.
exactly.
Okay, okay. No, I just to me it was interesting. I kind of was wishing it. I know we're fast forwarding to the end of that arc of those three episodes, but I was kind of wishing that the kid in the end had gone on the ship so that I could see her do other things. But
Well,
see,
that brings me up to what I was going to bring up. You think Disney's starting to get a little too formulaic with their storyline? I mean, we got almost every series getting a master come along with some side character. For example, you got Din Djarin coming up with Baby Yoda. It's like a mentor
yeah,
type. Even in the Bad Batch with Omega, and then now this. It just seems like, I don't know. If it had been one or two, maybe, but it seems like three in a row.
well, just think about it. You got Ahsoka too.
Yeah. So I don't know. Do you think it's getting a little formulaic, or just whatever?
Well, I mean, you could argue that. I think that's probably a valid case to make, but I think it's also, if it's something I did always want to see, and if that's where some of this may be going, then I'm good with it. But this idea of what happened in those years between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, right? In other words, in that gap of almost 20 years, there certainly was a purge, of Jedi. So if we see some of those characters, but then this also confuses me. So who's the guy that they introduced in the first episode of those three, right? It's like some other. I thought, oh, is this an Inquisitor? Doesn't look like it. So I mean, who
Wait,
is
wait,
he?
wait.
Where did he?
Which guy?
So the one
Wait,
that
wait,
says,
wait. Before we deep dive, let me just give you my overview real quick. I think, I think as I was watching this show, I think the Star Wars fan haters are just out of their mind right now. But we are in a rebirth, a great time to be a Star Wars fan. I mean, look what we got. We just got Skeleton Crew, which was pretty good. You get the re-release 20th anniversary. We get this. You got the Mandalorian movie coming up, which is look exciting. Ahsoka, we got these toys, that Cantina set that's freaking awesome, and I missed out on it. You know what I'm saying? It's not actually that bad.
yes,
Um,
yes.
yeah, but I really enjoyed this Tales of the Underworld. But let's deep
Well,
dive. Okay, so
yeah,
it picks up into a couple of good questions. When she is killed, she's put in. I'm assuming that she's back on Dathomir, back on
yeah,
her home planet,
yeah.
and she's put into that liquid. We don't really know how the witches tune into the Force. Obviously
Right,
they're Force users, but they're using it a separate way. So it just shows, because remember in Ahsoka, when we see other witches, they have those dead clone troopers, so they obviously
right,
have a way to bring people back, even
right.
though Ventress keeps her mind as opposed to those ones. But what did you think about that, having her come back? I mean, I guess it could have just been considered a retcon because they killed her in a book and they didn't really want to do that in the TV series. But
Well,
I, I
and
thought I thought it worked out pretty good.
it's already been established. I mean, they did this with to a different extent. They did this with Maul, right, in the show in the Clone Wars
Yeah.
series. So they, even though he wasn't dead, I mean, he was out of his mind, and so they brought him back to reality with their magic in a sense, or their use of the Force. But um, no, I'm fine with that. It's a sci-fi fantasy element, and I'm good with that. But I guess what I was wondering. So I just pulled it up on the video here. I went to Disney Plus. The character I'm talking about was introduced at about the 12-minute mark of that first episode. I don't know what. Now that I slow it down or I freeze the frame, and it does look like he could be an Inquisitor. It
You're
just
talking about the one they fought.
Yes.
Yeah, that's an Inquisitor. Yeah, that's
I
an
guess his uniform did looked a little bit different for me, but then now that I've seen the freeze frame,
it's a new Inquisitor.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that's what it is. So,
And actually, I got the picture up on our on our stream here. But here's the deal. One thing you got to realize: where in the timeline this takes place. If you notice, they're still talking about the Venture class starships.
right.
They're not even though it's Empire and the Clone Wars are over and they're switched to stormtroopers. They haven't yet become star destroyers. Although that thing that they're running on that they cut loose and they're running as it's turning, that's, if you look at it closely, that is actually a piece of a star destroyer. So that shipyard is building star destroyers as opposed to the uh
Yeah, no, that's a good point. As I'm
so it's
seeing
actually,
more,
it's early in the empire, which is why this would be one of the first inquisitors, someone we hadn't
well,
met yet.
a show like this, yes, or at least it hasn't been. I would say the Inquisitor core, for lack of a better term, has not been fully fleshed out. So as I'm seeing this a little bit better now, of course he has a this spinning double edged blade and all that business. So I think you're right. I think what this is sort of during a transition period of the Empire, right? They're moving from the Venator class to the traditional Imperial Star
Yes, yes,
Destroyers,
yes, yes.
and they're probably just ramping up the program with Inquisitors. So you're just going to see early examples of, whether they're aliens or former Jedi that are now hunting the Jedi. In this case, he was looking for the kid, finds him and her, and then the rest
Yeah.
picks up from there. What I did like, not only did I like, do I like her over Cad Bane as far as characters, that I have an interest in. But I thought that last episode was pretty interesting, where I had to laugh when she made that joke. The kid goes, "Oh, look, there's battle droids," and she goes, "Yeah, as useful as they always are." In other words, right? They weren't very effective to begin with, but
Yeah.
here they are, just rusted out hulks of metal. Um, but the whole story I thought was interesting, in the fact that it's kind of like the old stories you'd see here on a show, maybe a western, or even
Oh my
you know
gosh, that's another thing I was gonna bring up. The freaking music, bro. The music isn't. I mean, go back and watch it if you get a chance, and just focus on the music. Music's incredible. It almost has this, like you say, this motif of the western, and not that it's western music. It's almost like a samurai. It has a very
Well,
old
you
school samurai type,
we
crouching
we
tiger type thing. If you
yeah,
listen to it, and it
we've
has that
seen
vibe.
we've seen that in a lot of material from Star Wars, right? It's a
Yeah,
combination of
even the
East and
beginning of
West.
Mandalorian, even the beginning of Mandalorian, it had that vibe.
Right. And so when I'm seeing this episode, though, why I say more of a Western, where they talk, there's the music and the look of it, but also this idea that here's this guy, he's a former separatist. He recognizes her as, "Hey, I remember you. You were one of us, one of the quote unquote good guys," right? And
Yeah,
then she's like,
almost like she's running upon an old rebel general.
Bingo, like a Confederate, right?
Yeah,
That's kind of what I
Confederate.
thought. Yeah, and well, of course, they were called the Confederacy of Independent, systems. So
Yeah,
that's kind of a take on that as well. But I thought that's interesting, right? We don't always see that sort of take on characters. We always see, "Oh, you're a former," usually on the other side. But now you see the separatist, former separatist, because she notices all of his medals. But I thought that was an interesting story, right? They go get the water, come to find out they're not being attacked from raiders. They're being attacked from folks that actually they believe that's their water source, and that the other folks are stealing their water. And I thought it's a good episode in terms of kind of explaining and sort of displaying sort of the best aspects of what a Jedi is, right? And the kid understood the language, but we've seen how Jedi pick up different languages, or at least get kind of an understanding of what the native species is trying to communicate. So I like that, and that's just maybe me, but I think that's kind of what I liked. Um,
and
as
how many times in real life does that probably happen where you're fighting over something and it's just a misunderstanding of either culture or language? You know what I'm saying? Or it's like where
Yeah,
they gonna talk, hey, let's work it out. Maybe we can have such and such amount of water. We don't mean to steal it, but that goes to almost anything where like you say, it's just a misunderstanding. And
that's right. That's right. No, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, things like that happen. Things have happened that way, not just today, but over the course of history, right? Where someone says, "Well, that's our area," and then someone says, "No, that's ours." Now, it's different than someone blatantly going in and said, "We're taking control of this one way or the other." But it's another thing to say, "Hey, that maybe we didn't take into consideration this was their property or this territory theirs first and try and work out a deal, you know.
What did you think about her during that fight with the Inquisitor? That she didn't just kick his ass. Do you think? Okay, it could be a couple of reasons. Do you think she lost some of her ability from the death and rebirth, or has just she's
Mm,
been so out of step from fighting for so long, or was the Inquisitor just that badass? You know what? I because I just
you,
felt because she actually didn't beat him. It
right.
was Lycos that ended up coming in double lightsaber in him. So I
W-
don't know. She should have beat him a lot
Well,
easier.
you know, I didn't think about your first suggestion, which was maybe with her coming back or resurrected, that somehow she lost a step. That's possible. But certainly those other scenarios or other variables are possible too, which is maybe this guy was better than her. Maybe she had kind of lost a step just besides the sort of rebirth process. Maybe she just, you know, she's not out there swinging at people every day. So maybe she had kind of taken a step back. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
I really like how they set it up, like the character, and I think they really did over the 3 episodes. They really did a good job of setting up him not trusting her to then him finding out she's Ventress. It was assassin for Dooku
so
to slowly beginning to trust. So when they get to that planet at the end, and they fight, they they have that one scene and they almost like look like a master and apprentice with the way they have their lightsabers and ready to fight where they're actually teaming up, you know what I'm saying? The quality in both the animation, the stories, and the music for Tales of the Jedi, Tales of the Empire, and then this one, I think they're just perfect. But just to wrap up the first 3 episodes, where do you think this leads? You know, because you said he didn't go to the path. Although that side thing, the path, that was mentioned in Obi-Wan too.
right,
And I think
right,
even Quinlan Voss's name was mentioned in there.
right.
But anyway, so that may be something they're setting up for the future also.
I would
Um,
like to see that. Like I said, I've also wanted to have, I would have preferred to just have the kid out of the picture, only because I think there's other stories to tell with her character. But okay, that's fine. Maybe we see him again. Maybe we don't. Let me ask you this, though, before we move on. Ventress, what is the latest in the timeline that we've seen her? It's just prior to Star Wars and New Hope, right? It's basically just prior to that is what we've seen her in so far.
I don't think she makes it. Although there's nothing there, but I don't think we've seen her anything past that, past BBY 1. You know, anything like
Right,
that,
right. Okay,
or
okay.
even that late. I don't. I would assume that she doesn't make it somehow, but there's nothing. You know,
So
because
the last
Even Ahsoka's not. Well, actually, she is. Huh? Ahsoka is still around. Never mind.
the
But yeah,
last thing that we've seen her in chronologically as far as moving through time was probably the Bad Batch then, right? In terms of as
yes,
far as we've seen her, which is probably about maybe well that's about maybe 15 years out, isn't it? Or 20 years from A New Hope still?
yeah. I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure.
Yeah. So it's in that time frame though, post Sith.
But we definitely haven't seen her after. So,
Right.
but
Right.
again, if she shows up in Mandalorian or Ahsoka, then that will be the most recent. Although they'll
Yeah.
have a lot explained, she'd be a lot older.
Right.